Feel it, love it, live it.
See. Business Unusual, separating economic facts from fiction.
Good evening, I'm Mona-Lisa Dube and this is Business Unusual. Now, sport is big business around the world and it's estimated to be worth about 500 million United States dollars. The United States is a dominant in major sporting activities across the world, and in Africa, football is the most popular sport, and as most of us would know, in 2010, South Africa became the first African nation to host the FIFA World Cup. But meanwhile, in Zimbabwe, CAF bans all stadium as unfit for international matches. So where are the wheels falling off in Zimbabwe? Why is sport not as big as it should be compared to our neighbors? I had this conversation with the Sport and Recreation Commission Director General Prince Mupazviriho and the Premier Soccer League Chief Executive Officer Kennedy Ndebele around these and other issues about sport. Have a listen.
Z.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for making time to speak with us here on Business Unusual. I'll start with you, Mr. Mupazviriho. As a Director General of SRC, obviously you represent the government as far as sport is concerned. Is sport a business in Zimbabwe?
Yes, definitely. Sport is a business in Zimbabwe, and let me elaborate on that. Previously, we used to take sport as a pastime, but you know very well that this is an industry. When I talk of sport in Zimbabwe, I talk of sport and recreation. And the reason why I talk of sport and recreation is because it falls into two parts. There is a sport, that which people know, which is competitive sport, which ends up being allied sport, and Kenny would talk about that more because on a day-to-day basis that's what they deal with. But it's not everyone who then graduates into elite sport or who lives on sport. And you then find the majority of people taking various sporting activities either as leisure or as a way of keeping fit or for any other reason. And this is why when we look at it from a sport and recreation point of view.
Why do you think that people cannot live on sport, especially in Zimbabwe?
I'm not saying people cannot live on sport. I'm saying that's what used to happen. But that has since changed. And what is happening now is sport in various forms is actually a business, is actually giving people livelihoods. And the reason why I was trying to explain to you in terms of sport and also recreation is to demonstrate that those who have got the talent to pursue their sport of interest, they can actually live on it. Those who are not talented enough to pursue or to live on sport, they can actually benefit from sport in other activities. For example, you know very well that when you talk of an athlete, it is not just about running, or in the case of Kennedy, it is not just about kicking the ball. It means you need a person who will manufacture the ball. You need a person who will manufacture the shoes, a person who will manufacture the kit. So this is all to do with the sport. So when we talk of sport, it is actually a much broader issue than just the athlete.
Right.
So at SRC, we deal with these things. And when you look at our current act, it actually gives provision for that.
I was actually going to go there, that as government, what is your position in terms of actually facilitating sport to be a business? I know you did speak about it being a recreation as well, but obviously our focus will be on the business side of sport. So what policies have you put in place that actually encourage the business of sport?
Well, first and foremost, we have the Sports and Recreation Commission, Sports and Recreation Act, And that act allows certain things to happen. And it is actually what gives birth to everyone else who is participating in sport. In as much as we would want to make sure that we amend that act to make it much broader, to speak to the current environment. Remember, it was promulgated in the early 1990s. So we also have to keep it, to update it so that it also take into account the changes that has happened and where we want to go. But that doesn't mean that with the current law that is there, we cannot undertake effective sporting business. There is something which you had mentioned, which you said today you want to talk about sport business.
Yes.
I was actually trying to demonstrate to you, to highlight to you what sport is all about in terms of business. Mm-hmm. I know Kennedy lives in Bulawayo, and if he has got a team which is based in Bulawayo or in Wange, which is going to play in Mutare, it means there is a lot of business activities that is going to emanate or to be generated as a result of that activity alone. Moving from Wange, from Bulawayo to Mutare, it means you need transport. When you go there, it means you need accommodation and all sorts of things. This is all to do with the sport. Had the sport not been there, all these things would not have happened. So it's a much broader issue that would require us to spend the whole day or the whole week discussing. But I think for now, I'll stop where I am.
Kennedy, I'll include you in this conversation. Do you think we have a working business model in the sporting industry in Zimbabwe?
Well, probably I would want to thank you, Mona-Lisa, for inviting us. At least now with my big boss, the DG. We should be able to try and create an environment, because we're saying it's business. But getting to your question, sport being the most popular of social activities, I know the other social activities that are there, like arts and music, but sport is key, and it's a business. But now when we look at the business of sport, we may have to look at the size. What are we talking about? Is it small business or big business? My point to take here is that sport is a massive business, but then how we structure it is something that we can then debate here.
Exactly. So you have a lot of experience as well when we're looking at the Premier Soccer League and your experience in this industry. Let's look at, I'm glad you said that it's a massive industry, and that's the case across the world when it comes to sport. But when we look at the Zimbabwean context, how would you describe it? You speak about small business and you speak about massive business. How would you describe it in the Zimbabwean context?
I think we're still at infancy level. Maybe we are not structuring it in the manner that we can then also call it massive business. We have got the talent, we've got the facilities, we've got administrators. We all recognize that sport is a business, but then how to grow it, I think that's where we need to look at holistically, together with the government coming up with policies, but it also starts with the sports organizations themselves. How do they structure themselves? What do they want to achieve? What are the incentives and what are the requirements? I think one key area that we would probably be looking at is governance.
Okay, so this is where the SRC comes in, right? He spoke about a number of things when we speak about business in Zimbabwe as a sport, and he did talk about logistic, etc. And you did agree that sport is a business in Zimbabwe. So why is it that there seems to be no single profitable entity when it comes to sport in Zimbabwe, if all these policies that you speak of and all the sport being a business in Zimbabwe? Why is that?
It's the issue that Kenny mentioned at the end, that is to do with the structure of it. But let me also take you back to my earlier comment. You know very well during, you look at maybe my age and Kenny's, when we were growing up, sport was never taken as a business. It was taken as a pastime, as a social event. But now we know that this is serious business, and those who have got the talent, those who want to go into the business of sport, they can actually live on it. So because of that realization now, we are shifting from the olden days where we only took sport as a social activity, and we are now moving to sport as a socio-economic activity.
So where are we now?
This is what we are now currently dealing with. And that's where the comment of Kenny comes in, which is very important. How do we structure it?
So where are we now?
Where we are now, we are drifting in the direction that all those who are interested in the business of sport or sport business can actually play a role. And let me also highlight that we have got various categories which we can refer to. We are not only talking of sport as a business as it relates to the athlete. We are talking of sport as a business as we link up with the various service providers, those who facilitate the activities of sport. We are also talking of various sport delivery agencies. All these people, all these stakeholders come in. So it is important that people understand when we speak of sport, we are not just talking of the athlete, the individual athlete. We are talking of every other facet of sport that goes into successful activities.
Right, and that is where you come in as a Sport Recreation Commission. Kennedy spoke about the structure, and I take it that's your responsibility to make sure that there are competitions in the country, to make sure that you cater for sports, like you said, on and off the field. It's not only on the field, but sport, it goes off the field, right? So that's where you come in as a SRC in terms of the structure. So that's what I'm asking. In terms of the structure, what sort of structure do we have? Do we have a structure?
Well, the current existing structure which is there, you have got the sports and recreation. Of course, you have got government, the ministry, which is at the top, which then gives the national policies. Then immediately below, there is the Sports and Recreation Commission. And the Sport and Recreation Commission is the board which has got the mandate to oversee the implementation of programs and policies in the sport and recreation sector.
Right.
And Mona-Lisa, remember, I earlier on tried to dissect the difference between what we are calling sport, as in elite sport, and how people have been regarding sport, and the leisure side of things, which is the recreational side. It is important because once that is clearly understood, we can then be in a position to marry the two. When Kennedy speaks of sport as mass sport, we are starting at the bottom of the pyramid. And that bottom of the pyramid allows everyone to participate in sport.
Right.
And who is that everyone? Everyone who can do any activity, either for purposes of keeping fit or being talented and so on and so forth. And from there, you can then select those who want to go as successful athletes, going up the ladder. But those who are not into sport, it means they are now partaking in various recreational activities, or you can call it leisure activities. This is where the real business is, because the consumption of sport goods and services is actually where the majority of people are. Therefore, we need to be very clear when we talk of sport business. We are also including the consumption of the various sports goods and services.
I'm glad you speak about the consumption of these services, and we're going to get into that. Now, Kennedy, as the man who is at the helm of what's arguably the most popular league in the country, and you run the day-to-day activities of the PSL, what sort of structure, maybe when we focus on football, what sort of structure is there in terms of the business model of the football in Zimbabwe?
Okay, Mona-Lisa, I think from what Mr. Mupazviriho is saying, we have the bigger sport and recreation side of the sporting business, where it's inclusive of every person who's keen to participate, either as an athlete or socially, as just to keep fit. So, and at the same time, that person also consumes the elite sport activity, either as a fan or as a business supplier or just as a commentator. So, this topic is very broad. But coming to the Premier Soccer League, where we have our 18 clubs that are organized in such a manner that there's a document that what is expected of each and every club under club licensing. This is where the business side of it is crafted, that there has to be a structure that will ensure that the football club is able to throughout the season participate in competitions, fulfill all the fixtures, and ensure that they are involved in youth development, they market their activities. So in terms of the Premier League, you expect clubs then to be almost at the same level, making sure that they are involved in the development of the game.
Yes, I get that. So what's the current structure right now? What sort of model do you have? How are you making money? Are you making money from gate take-ins? Are you making money from sponsorship? Are you making money from partnership? What's the current structure that I think you also spoke about how you need to figure out who's consuming this. And if people are consuming sport, it means they are coming to attend the football matches. So how is it going in the money side?
Okay, there are two scenarios. I'm not sure you're asking about the league itself or the members of the league. At times it's difficult to distinguish, but the clubs are generating their revenue through sponsorships, partnerships, sale of players, sale of replica, television rights for broadcasting. So there are a lot of other revenue streams that each and every club is expected to generate, and the league is assisting, running competitions, getting sponsorship for the competitions.
And how's that going? How is that going in terms of the sponsorship, in terms of the television rights? You spoke about selling merchandise. How's that going?
Okay, at individual club level, each and every club then has a plan for the merchandising. Then the television rights, if you have television rights, they are collectively and centrally owned by the league or all the 18 clubs, and the revenue is supposed to be shared equally. Unfortunately, at the moment, we don't have a commercial broadcaster. We're still working on various options to get television, but world over, most leagues survive mainly on television rights fees, which they receive from the broadcast of their matches. So we had television partner Supersport for 5 years. Currently, we don't have, as I have said. So
what happened?
One area
what happened
of the
to that?
Of sport.
What happened to the Supersport deal that you bring up? What happened to that?
Well, at the end of the 5-year contract, Supersport decided not to renew the partnership. I think they withdrew in a few other countries. I think they're in the southern part of Africa. They are only with South Africa and Zambia at the moment.
Would you know why?
Well, from the organizational side, they are downsizing. And maybe from our side, the expense of getting events here and the cost of production, teams spread across, and I'm not too sure about the sales of the decoders, because that was one of the conditions, that there has to be an improvement in the growth in viewership on their side.
in terms of the other model of actually having fans come through to watch football, we've been witnessing a decrease in the number of people that are actually coming to watch football, and they are the primary consumer. Obviously, we used to fill up the City Sports Center, but now apparently there's just very little people that are coming through. What do you attribute that? Of course, we're going to get into COVID, but what do you attribute that to?
Pre-COVID, without COVID, we look at the economic environment, the ability of a fan to come and pay and watch a football match. One of the reasons why the numbers are going down. Obviously, you have other counter attractions when you have your EPL, your La Liga, and your Italian League Serie A being broadcast at the same time. You have got football matches. People are engaged with other activities, going to church and so forth. So it's really not, you can't really touch and say this is the reason, but the economic environment has a big role really in terms of how people get to have enough money to go and watch football matches.
Mr. Mupazviriho, as government, what is your vision for sport in terms of growing it? And when you're looking at all these issues that Kennedy here is bringing up to do with, voting rights, selling replicas and stuff like that, what is your vision for sport?
Thank you very much. I will respond to that question, first of all, by highlighting some of the issues that Ndebele highlighted. He looked at it from a very technical and operational point of view. When you asked him why, there seems to be a decline in terms of viewership and so forth, and why maybe Supersport had to didn't renew their contract. The valid issues which he has raised are among some of the reasons. But let us also go beyond that and say what would cause the decision, what is the basis of those decisions. It attracts our attention as the Sports and Recreation Commission.
Right.
And one of those issues that we are supposed to be dealing with are the issues to do with governance issues. We want to make sure that there is good corporate governance in the sport and recreation sector. The moment you have good corporate governance in the sector, it means you are also attracting corporate sponsorship. And with that corporate sponsorship, this is where the issue of television rights and so on and so forth comes in, because the corporates would want to be identified with good brands, with successful brands. And those successful brands come with good corporate governance. So that's one issue that we are dealing with at a corporate level. Then the second issue is how do we make our environment, our league attractive? Although it also emanates from corporate governance issues, but it is also a function of how do we structure ourselves, how do we do certain things, and how do we make it easy for business to thrive. Again, it's an issue that we are dealing with, that we are addressing, and we are already in the process of finalizing the sport and recreation sector national strategic plan. And we have gone around discussing with the various stakeholders at a higher level. And please, this one, you don't have to ask me about it.
I was
to
actually going to ask you a follow-up question on that.
Yeah, it's. I mean, the next point I'm raising is something which is being handled at the ministry level, which is to do with what I had earlier on said, that we also want to update our SRC Act, because it is that act which would then create an environment, a framework within which the business would thrive in the sport and recreation sector. So that is happening, and very soon you will be hearing a lot about it. And from the sporting stakeholders, they've been coming forward and saying you need to deal with these issues in these areas and so on and so forth.
Is the issue to do with...
That one is, it's an issue being handled. It's not for me to comment for now, but I'm just highlighting that as we implement the Act, there are certain issues that we see which need to be amended so that we can create the desirable environment.
Is the issue to do with taxes and duty also going to be addressed in this new framework? Because I remember a couple of years ago, we had a boxer, I think it was Manucci, who came in with his trophy, did the country proud, but it was confiscated at the airport by Zimbabwe officials saying that he had to pay duty for that. Are those some of the issues that are going to be addressed in terms of cohesion within certain facets of the government as far as sporting is concerned?
Without referring to a specific issue, currently there is already a provision in the Act where if they are donated equipment which is used by sport persons or by clubs, they can apply to us so that we facilitate that waiver of duty. But your question is much broader than that. We are saying if we want to invest in sport, it then means we need to attract investment. What are the benefits, attractions that we need to put in place so that we attract investment? And this is where the issue of tax rebates, the issue of tax breaks comes in. And certainly it's an issue that we are also dealing with.
Mr. Ndebele, apart from some of these concerns and the provisions that Mr. Mupazviriho here has indicated, first of all, were you consulted also when this act was being drafted? And what are some of the issues that you actually would want to see having been addressed in this new policy?
Engaged with the SRC and contributed in terms of the expectation. We had our symposium last year, which we are happy that the SRC facilitated and ensured that even the presenters, international presenters, were impressed. They were accessed the venue with no challenges. So we are working hand in hand with the SRC since I think last year. There's been a lot of engagement. There are issues to do, as we have said before, governance, where club licensing will probably also feature in that document that will come through. We see when I'm talking about club licensing, we are saying if someone wants to establish a business organization, which is called a football club, they need to meet certain requirements. Yes, it's provided in the Act at the moment, but it has to really create an enforceable situation that you don't have somebody waking up in the morning to say it's from a football club, plays in the Premier League for 6 months, it falls just like that, and then that's the end of it.
Why? Why, Mr. Ndebele? While you're still on that, why is it that's happening a lot in the Premier League, where someone just comes up with a football club and then it doesn't work out? I know that there's Mushawani Stars, for an example. They actually came in the league for a while, but they had to close down. Why are football clubs struggling? Why are they coming in the league and leaving? What are the issues there?
The issues are to do with governance. The issues are to do with registration.
Governance on whose side? Governance on the football side, or governance on the policy side?
On the football side. The lack of corporate governance, good corporate governance that Mr. Mupazviriho was talking about. This is what we are working together to ensure that for one to really say, I'm into this business. Like any other business, whether it's a hair salon or whatever, you have to have a license, a radio or television station license. If there are no licenses, then anyone will wake up in the morning and say, I've got a radio station. The next thing is closed down and employees are left stranded. So this is critical that we work together and share, because if you look at the last 10 years, maybe about 20-25 clubs that have played in the Premier League that have gone defunct. They don't exist anymore. So we are engaging the SRC. We discuss the issues of television, the issues of importation of equipment, which is being addressed. So in terms of working together with the SRC, we are very happy, and hopefully when the document comes out, we should see these changes. I could feel you are also worried about this business of clubs coming up, and then the next thing they are not there.
But is it not an issue?
Regulations will then enforce people.
Is it not an issue of us using an old model where the owner is the one who is expected to finance the football club? Because obviously that's a strain on one person. Like you said, that the idealistic way of sponsoring sport is when you have broadcasting rights, when you have merchandise, when you are able to actually have more gate takings coming in. There's several ways that can actually fund sport in general, but in Zimbabwe right now, is it not because we only have an old model where the owner of the club is the one who is solely responsible of sponsoring the club?
It's a question of separating, like Mr. Mupazviriho said, sport and recreation. People come there from a recreational point just to have a personal satisfaction, ego, and they just play social football until they get to the Premier League. So now with the engagement that is involved, elite sport has to be structured separately, regulated separately, in line with the government directives, also in line with FIFA requirements that when you get into this business, you must have A, B, C, D, able to fulfill fixtures, have a clear governance structure, separation of powers, the owner from the secretariat, and there must be offices. You must have a fully structured secretariat that runs football business on a day-to-day basis, as opposed to the ownership. So the new regulations that will come in, or the SRC policy, will obviously, from our discussions, address these concerns, so that we build business units. If you want to remain at recreational level with your club, we are 46, you want to play with your 17-year-old boys, that's recreation. But if you want to play in the top league, or you need to meet minimum requirements, it's not going to be promotion because you have won football matches on the field. But it must be promotion into the elite league because you meet the minimum requirements. You have the offices, capacity to develop players. You have audited financial statements that you submit at the end of the year to get a license to play the following season. This is what is now happening at CAF level, that you cannot go and participate in inter-club championships when you don't have a stadium that meets the minimum requirements, that you don't have a coach who's top classified, maybe CAF A or CAF Pro. You cannot participate when you don't have club offices where a CAF or ZiFM or SRC will come and inspect and say, okay, this is Mona-Lisa Football Club's place. And it's business of football only, nothing else. You have got your tax certificate, you've got your VAT, you are submitting your returns, and you are a business organization that is supposed to develop football, generate revenue, develop young stars, develop players for the national teams.
Are you saying that the current situation right now in the sporting industry, particularly from football, where you specialize in, it's not an issue to do just with policy, but it's an issue to do with just people that are within the sporting industry that are not as organized as expected to, if sport is going to actually become a profitable business in the country? Or it goes on to not having clear policies that actually assist them in doing that?
Yeah, going back to
let me, if you allow, Kenny, let me start. Let me come in. Then you can then add on. The answer is that's how we have been conducting our business, and mainly because we have been approaching it from a social side of things. And
when you say
when
you say we, you mean who? You mean the government and the
everyone? No. Everyone in the sector, because our discussion is not a blame game. Is to look at where are we, how have we been faring, and what do we need to do. So it's everyone in the sector without pointing a finger.
Including the
to
SRC.
anyone. Well, this is why I'm also including ourselves in that, because we have got a role to play. We have to put in place certain guidelines, certain regulations, which then allows what Kenny was saying to be put in place. A good example is we have already now established or put in place what we call the tier system. And that tier system clearly defines in terms of associations who is in this category and what is expected in that category. It therefore follows automatically for you to be in a particular category, you must meet certain standards. It also follows that for you to go and participate or represent the country at a certain level, you must be able to meet certain requirements, certain standards. And what are those standards? It's not just standards by making sure that you meet the criteria as set by the host international association. It is also standards as set by our national standards. So these are the issues that we are putting in place, and the criteria, the club licensing system, which he was referring to, speaks to that. The issue to do with the corporate governance issues speaks to that. So this is a whole gamut of things that we are actually putting in place. And why are we doing that? We are doing that because we realize that the sector is actually a very big sector which can create employment, which can make a lot of businesses viable, and which can generate a lot of revenue. Now, anyone who has got talent can actually go in without necessarily having to receive a certain qualification to do so and participate if you have got the talent. Anyone who has got funding can actually come in and establish a business which provide goods and services which feed into the sector. If you have got the interest and you have got the resources, but you need an environment which is conducive enough for you to do that, which is conducive enough to attract.
And it's your responsibility to create that environment. Yes.
This is precisely that's what we are doing, and this is precisely who we are, what we stand for.
How long do you think it's going to take to actually get there? Because from what both of you are saying, if all this disorder, so to speak, has not been addressed, it might be difficult to get sponsorship. It might be difficult to get broadcasting rights. It might be difficult to actually allow people to bring in merchandise and sell it at a profit. All these issues around what can work for a business for sport as a business is dependent on there having been a conducive environment for that to happen. So when likely are we going to see this conducive environment that allows sport to thrive as a business in Zimbabwe?
There has been a lot of traction, and from a structural point of view, even at SRC, there have been a lot of reforms that have taken place. And you actually, when we were discussing informally, you actually alluded to the fact that you remember hearing my appointment when I came here. That was part of those reforms which brought me here. And we have got a new team of people who are looking into these issues. We also have a new board which has got also the mandate to deal with these issues. So things are happening. And you also heard Kenny saying since last year, we have been working closely. It is part of that process.
I get that, and I understand that. I understand that there is work going on, but do you have timelines? Do you have deadlines? Because you find that, even if somebody is talented, you keep referring to the issue to do with talent. But even if someone is talented here in Zimbabwe, they might not explode or come up as much as they would if they are based, for example, in South Africa. So do you have a time frame or a timeline as to when this is going to be finalized and when this is all going to be organized? Because sporting in Zimbabwe has been there for a while.
Had it not been the impact of the COVID-19, I can tell you some of the issues would have been already been finalized and put in place. And we are looking at, by the time we get to end of this year, most of these issues will already have been addressed.
You do know end of this year is in 3 months, right, Mr. Mupazviriho?
Yeah, sure. I will give you an example. I will just give you an example as an illustration of what I'm saying. When the lockdown came in, there was one of the most impacted on sector or industry is the sport and recreation industry. There was no sporting taking place. But right now, we have started the training. And I would want to believe Mr. Ndebele can actually confirm that they are now starting to do training. And remember, when we say they are starting to do training, you are now starting to hear even some qualifiers, some competition at a CAF level, at a FIFA level. And with it comes a lot of activities, comes with a lot of measures that will be put in place. So we have also been preparing ourselves to make sure that when that happens, we are not found wanting.
So the sporting industry, Mr. Ndebele, has opened up now after the we're still in the lockdown somehow, but as the lockdown restrictions have been eased off, can you safely say that sporting has been opened up as well?
Yes, we are working towards the restart. It's not going to be like the next day, boom, we're playing football. There's going to be testing, which we will be starting immediately. There's been meetings in the last few weeks between ZiFM, SRC, the ministry, and PSL. We're happy to say there's been a lot of progress that has been made. As you probably are aware, Zimbabwe will be participating in the CHAN competition in January. So our players should be physically conditioned to ensure that they are ready for that competition.
If I can also add, Mona-Lisa, you are also aware that our cricket team, the Chevrons, are going to be traveling to Pakistan. That's part of the easing that is happening, and it's part of the facilitation that we are doing.
Right. So let's look at when it comes to broadcasting, right? What's going on there? I mean, in terms of even before, I know you did mention that before the lockdown, before COVID-19 happened, there's a lot that was going on that has been stalled or lost somewhere in translation. But when we look at broadcasting, there hasn't been any, much of visuals when it comes to sport. ZBC doesn't really air, the national broadcaster doesn't really air some of the sporting events that are happening. And I remember at some point, that was when sport was in its high, ZBC used to broadcast some of these events, and that actually contributed to sport being more of a business than a recreation, like you're saying. So what's going on? Is there any progress in that area?
I'll start. We probably, the government will, or through the SRC, will then have to also look at the Broadcasting Act. There are lots of acts, as you are aware, that have to be looked at in terms of allowing other broadcasters to come on board. We're trying to work on online live streaming, which is not easy with the connectivity. Once you lose connectivity or if the speed is slow for a 90-minute football match, it becomes a bit difficult. But
data as well. Data.
Yes, so it's really about the Broadcasting Act, which probably the ministers they engage may look at that, because in the southern part of Africa, if you don't have Supersport as your partner for broadcast, it's very difficult. And you will understand ZBC are free to air channel. It's not going to be cheap, because producing one match will be about $10,000 United States dollars. So for one to produce 9 matches a week, that's a lot of money.
Considering that we actually lost Supersport. I mean, we had Supersport in our doorstep.
Yes, we have re-engaged, but we haven't had positive feedback. We continue to re-engage, but if there is another broadcaster who may come on board, East and Central Africa, they've got new broadcasters coming on board. Tanzania, they've got their Azam, and then the Chinese, that is the channel that is doing Uganda. Now they are going to be doing Kenya. So Star Times are doing that. So for us in the southern part, maybe once we get other privately pay-per-view channels coming on board, we should see more of our sport, not only football, other sporting codes on television.
Do you have a time frame that you've given to this, to when we can actually see this happening?
Well, it's difficult to put a time frame because there are a lot of things. I mean, we still talk of governance. We're still talking about making our football attractive, or all our sports attractive. With Supersport, they were impressed with us. All the matches were kicking off on time.
But
we got a lot of young players that went and played abroad. But as I'm saying, a cost of $10,000 per match. By 4 matches a week. Remember, I used to do double matches, one earlier in the day and then the other one later in the afternoon, or we couldn't even do evening matches because most of the venues don't have floodlights, and those that have floodlights, the cost of electricity is so high that you don't take that risk of broadcasting a match live on television.
So it's a holistic approach. It's a lot of macroeconomic issues that have to be addressed for us. Like you keep saying, the sporting industry in Zimbabwe is not as attractive as you would want it to be because of all these other issues that we are discussing right now. So Mr. Mupazviriho, as we wrap up, what are you committing to do as the SRC? To make sure that sport becomes lucrative, to make sure that sport is not only seen as a hobby?
Well, let me start by commenting on the issue that you have just been discussing. And in as much as we have got a role to play, PSL has got a role to play, all the other sport associations have got a role to play in terms of making sure that everything is okay, their houses are in order. From your own side, I know it's something which you can only push up. We also need you guys in the media to be also supportive of the efforts that are going on. In as much as we can do what we are doing, when you come and say, pay us in order to broadcast your match, it means you are actually putting a load on us. You are not looking at it from a business point of view. You should actually be saying, this is an opportunity that we can air this live and then attract corporates to come in and they advertise and you make money out of it. So it's either way.
You're expecting the media to air it for free?
No, not to air for free, but they should look at the business side of things, how they can also make money out of it, not just to be asking it from PSL and so forth. They should actually be looking at PSL as got the content, which is the match that has to be broadcast. That's the content that they have. And that content has got value. And that value can actually be consumed by a number of people who are interested in making sure that they want to be associated with PSL, they want to be associated with broadcasting these matches. That's how you make money, and this is how these people outside make money. I was watching various stations last night, and I would see it was some mountain cycling, which was happening, and Mercedes was all over, and it was rugged terrain and what have you. And those big corporates were actually supporting, and you would see the people who are involved in it, the cycling, they are wearing jerseys which have got sponsorship from various companies, various corporates. That's what you need to do. And that money, where you see someone putting a jersey, it means corporates have actually put in money to, say, a media house to be able to air that live. So that's the business. You have seen an opportunity that you can ride on. So our system here has been, we have to, when you approach us to say you want to have an interview, we always say, what's in it for us? We don't see the value, the opportunity that you have created for people to understand the issues, for people to come in and support it. That's what you have created. So it becomes a big issue. It becomes a lot of value. It becomes a building block. That's what I'm saying. So it's not a one-sided issue. Then the other issue, as winding up comment, we are working closely with various national sport associations. And the issues that we have referred to in terms of strategy, in terms of making sure that we have got a conducive environment, that's what we are pushing. And our responsibility is to make sure that we make the business in sport business easy. We would want to make it thrive. We would want to be seen as one of those countries that are very competitive, that are very active in sport. And for that to happen, it means SRC has to create a conducive environment. And that's what precisely we are working on.
Okay, and you said you will have this done at least by the end of the year. If I remember what you said correctly when I asked you the time frame.
Yes.
Okay, the end of
Remember,
the year.
we are also working in a national framework. We have got the Vision 2030. And within the context of Vision 2030, we also have the National Development Strategy. Remember, currently the Transitional Stabilization Program is coming to an end in December. Mm-hmm. So we already
That's your deadline as well. That's your target.
Yes. So in terms of the strategy, we are actually contributing to that national vision. And as a sector, what is it? What is going to be our contribution, and so on and so forth? And that contribution has already been made.
Mr. Ndebele, as we wrap up, as the CEO of the Premier Soccer League, what are you committing to do to ensure that our sporting industry is also lucrative and attractive?
The immediate task is to restart the resumption of football, testing, training, and coming up with some form of competition before the end of the year, so that we have plans for the forthcoming season, so that our partners are clear on the way forward, because all along we haven't had a fixed time line to say we're starting here and what we're planning for the next year, so that our commercial partners are also in the picture, and commitment to bring back football on television or screen, whatever, action live to the fans. Then the other aspect will be, I'm sure as well from your end, that this discussion has been productive. A lot of issues have come and shown that the sport industry is huge. You may then try and have this being a weekly program with various sports practitioners to build from this, because we may be talking about this as a once-off topic, yet it's supposed to be almost a daily or weekly subject of discussion.
No, but I think as far as discussions are concerned, we can have discussions, but ultimately what needs to happen is action from those discussions. We can sit here and discuss all day, but if whatever is discussed is not actioned, then it defeats the whole purpose.
Yes, but once we have the media coming through with these discussions, you will have boxes to tick to say if you don't call us until January next year, we may also relax and say, okay, we'll talk to Mona-Lisa sometime in September.
So that's where the problem is. Why do you need people to push you to do your work? Why can you not just do it without people pushing for it?
That's the role of the media, to inform and to monitor and to oversee that these things are happening.
But Mona-Lisa, if I can say something, it's not a question of being forced to do certain things. It's a question of making sure that the narrative is what we are doing or what we want to do. And there is a monitoring process which is coming through the feedback that we have by discussing these issues. So when we discuss, the listeners would actually say, yes, what is being said, we are seeing it. There is something which needed to be addressed, and so on and so forth. Because this is a much broader. Remember, sport, you can actually decide to do sport at your own workplace there, which is commercial. You can actually have your own team there.
We actually had a small football club here with the gents. I don't know what happened to it. I think I need to follow up on that.
You see now. But the challenges which they faced, unless we know them, unless we discuss, we have got some forum where we discuss, we would not be able to address those things. That's what Ken is saying. it's also promoting what has been happening so that it actually gives other people the enthusiasm to join in and participate.
Absolutely, I agree with you there, but all I'm saying is beyond the discussions, beyond the conversations, when each of us are done with this conversation right now, and then we go on to do what is supposed to be done and what we would have agreed on having to be done. That's just my point. But gentlemen, thank you so much for your time this evening. I appreciate you taking time to chat with us and talk about what is very crucial in terms of the sporting sector in Zimbabwe. I know it's in the hearts of different people depending on which sport you are supporting, but it's definitely a conversation that we had to have. Thank you so much to the Director General of the Sports Recreation Commission, Mr. Prince Mupazviriho, and Kennedy Ndebele, the Chief Executive Officer of the Premier Soccer League. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And that wraps up this evening's episode of Business Unusual. I am Mona-Lisa Dube. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Business Unusual, separating economic facts from fiction.